Alright, I'm back. I have now played through the game for a second time. And I've been taking notes. There's a lot that makes more sense the second time you play through. And I actually want to start with the endings. There's 3 different endings you can get. I did look into, I haven't watched them, but I've read descriptions of them. So obviously if you're watching this Let's Play, you probably don't mind spoilers about the ending of the game since you've already seen one of them, but I'm getting into the other 2 right now. So if you're planning on playing through this game yourself and you're curious about the other endings and you want to see if you will get another one, then don't listen to this. But there's 3 different endings, and taking a page out of Silent Hill, which is always a good idea, the different endings depend on your gameplay style. You can have basically I think they basically correspond to, they're meant to correspond to how determined is Elster to get back to Ariane. I think that's the interpretation I go with in terms of the theming of the story. Because if you go through the whole game being stealthy the entire time, not trying to kill any enemies, trying to stay out of danger, constantly healing yourself so that you're at full health the whole time, you get one ending. You can get a balanced ending, which is the one I got. And having read the descriptions of the endings of the 3 main endings, I think it's actually the one I prefer. It's the one I'm happiest with. And then if you go through the game like super kind of reckless, you kill a bunch of enemies, you get hurt a bunch, and you don't heal. You stay at like low health. And then I believe also like actually just dying a lot and reloading the game will also help you get the last ending. If you play careful and you get that first ending I mentioned, you get the leave ending, which I think I would have been annoyed with if I had gotten it. What it basically boils down to is Elster makes it to the Penrose ship. She finally gets there, and then doesn't remember why she's there. I think that from what I remembered, it seemed like she doesn't even remember who Ariane is and doesn't even manage to find her, and then leaves. And that's just the ending of the story. There's the chance that, depending on your interpretation, if Adler is right, Adler believes the reason this cycle keeps happening is A, the Eldritch Abomination has taken over the base, but B, it is being made worse by the fact that Elsters keep showing up and continuing the cycle. So the implication is, if an Elster makes it all the way to the ship and then doesn't remember and leaves, you might interpret that as the cycle is broken and perhaps the evil will be contained. You could maybe make that argument, and that's really the only thing that's narratively satisfying about that ending. Aside from that, I feel like I would be very frustrated with that ending. The balanced ending is the one I got, when you're kind of in the middle. You kill n amounts of enemies, you get hurt a decent amount of times, but you're not super reckless about it. In which the implication that I did not really pick up on, but the implication from the ending I got, knowing what the third ending is, the implication of the second ending is, Elster remembers that she's supposed to get to Ariane, but she does not remember the specific promise. And that's why we don't figure out what it is Elster flat out does not remember what it is. And Ariane, in turn, does not remember Elster. Or at the very least, certainly doesn't remember the promise either. And so we get this kind of ambiguous space where the 2 of them are together, but there's the question of, well, what was it all for? We don't know. So all we can do is just be with each other. The third ending is more sad than that one, and it's one that I was kind of worried about, actually, when my ending was kicking in. That's where I thought it was going, and I was really worried about it. But I do think thematically and narratively it kind of makes sense, even though it's sad. Which is, if you're super reckless and Elster is trying to get to Ariane at all costs, and that's your gameplay style, the ending is that Elster does remember the promise. And the promise is, come find me so that you can kill me. We get a lot of notes towards the end of the game there about Ariane is wounded, appears to be freezing to death because something about the cryogenic chamber wasn't working properly, or something along those lines. And she wants to die. And Elster's promise was, "I will wake up, I will come find you, and I will end your suffering," basically. Which, yeah, I don't love that ending. Obviously, like, it's sci-fi horror. Ariane is going through things that luckily none of us in real life have to deal with. But I'm always hesitant when a story shows suicide to be the quote-unquote right thing, and I don't think that ending is meant to say that it's morally right for Elster to basically partake in euthanasia. But I think it's a very sensitive topic and you have to be careful with it. I think it fits with the themes of the story, but it's always a little bit icky that, like, these are two female characters who, from what we've seen, appear to be romantically involved with each other, and the ending of the story being not only one or both of them die, but specifically one of them wants the other to kill her. Doesn't sit too well. It's not my favorite ending in the world, even though it's fitting. It's not like, it's just pretty sad. Whereas the ending I got was pretty bittersweet, and so that's, of those three endings, I actually do prefer the one I got. Okay, Editor Flint here with a couple of corrections on a worse quality microphone because my actual good microphone is being really testy at the moment for some reason. A couple of corrections. It does appear that in all three endings, Elster actually does remember the promise. In the Leave ending, there's text that appears on screen that is something along the lines of, "I've came all this way, but I can't bring myself to finish it, to complete the task." And that is when she leaves. She obviously remembers in the promise ending, and it doesn't quite make sense why in the left and right endings she would remember, but in the middle one she doesn't. And then there's also that German text that appears that I looked it up and basically says something along the lines of, "I'm still me, but you're not you anymore," which is text that is essentially from Elster's perspective. She's here to fulfill the promise, but Ariane can't remember the promise, and so it just doesn't quite make sense to fulfill that promise anymore, because I feel like that would be an extra streak of cruelty on top of the promise ending if Elster were still to follow through. So I think it does make sense for Elster to, at that point, almost in relief, again, I maintain that it's a very bittersweet ending, realize that she is not going to fulfill the promise after all, and is just going to lay down and die next to Ariane. Yeah, I stand by. That's my favorite of the three endings. And also with the gameplay style, I think matches the ending. And then the second order of business I want to put in here is the reason I got that wrong is because I was looking at a bad source. So if you want to engage in good Signalis discourse, talking with people who have thoroughly studied the game and played it and know it like the back of their hands, I would, of all places, recommend checking out Reddit. The Signalis subreddit has a lot of people who are really committed to this game and are really paying a lot of close attention. And then also YouTube has some really good video essays and breakdowns and stuff like that from a couple of cool channels, one of which I'll be talking about later, actually. But what you should not do is look at like the gaming news websites, like I think Gizmodo and IO9 put out one, and then Screen Rant is the one I actually looked at. I didn't actually watch the endings when I was recording this. I just read about them, and that's where I got the information that was wrong about Elster remembering and not remembering. Because it turns out those gaming websites just are wrong about the game. Like, they give blatantly wrong information. I think a lot of them give wrong information on how to get the different endings. I saw one saying that to get the ending I got, you have to rush through the game as fast as possible, and it has to be a less than 6-hour playthrough. My playthrough was almost twice that amount, and I got the memory ending, so clearly that's not the main stipulation. So yeah, if you are interested to find out more, I would encourage scanning through YouTube, maybe scanning through the Signalis subreddit, and don't pay much attention to anywhere else, because I checked multiple sources and there are a lot of people out there who really have no idea what they're talking about. But anyways, on with the show. I don't know what the secret ending is. I know how to get it, and I've pretty much gotten there. We're in the safe room right before we solve the moon puzzle that we get from the tarot cards. But before we do that, sorry, like I said, I've been taking notes. Been taking a lot of notes. So I'm going to, hopefully you guys care about this. If not, I'll actually put a timestamp if you just want to go straight to the ending and skip all my rambling. But I like to think the rambling is part of the fun. That's what you get from Let's Plays, is rambling. That's the thing. So I guess a little bit of speaking about how to get the secret ending. I think I mentioned it a little bit before, but just to review, you have to pick up, if you don't want to solve it using the internet, you have to identify a radio broadcast at some point in the game. I didn't really look up exactly where it was. Then feed that transmission through an SSTV, like, encryptor thing that gives you an image. The images will show you what locations of the game the 3 secret keys are. Then you have to go to those locations, have your radio tuned to a certain frequency, and pick up the keys. Pretty much everything I just said, I don't know how people figure it out. I leave it to the internet to do the work for me in that regard. And I, in fact, did so. And I found the 3 keys. The 3 keys are in the Sierpinski level, in the isolation room, which is like the spooky room with like 4 cages and 1 storage unit walking around. It's hidden in one of the cages. That one was a little weird because there's not really like that isolation room doesn't really have any emotional meaning, whereas the other 2 kind of do. The second one doesn't directly relate to any of the characters, but it is. I pointed it out. That portrait of Saturn eating his son. What's the artist's name? I'm gonna look it up. One of those spooky paintings. Which, by the way, if you look up the photo of that painting, the artist didn't name it. The artist went insane and died, and then they found that painting in his house along with like 10 other really creepy paintings as well. Honestly, if it, I'm always hesitant to do Francisco Goya, which, come to think of it, is probably, that's similar to the name of the artist from Eve, isn't it? I bet that's where that name came from. In fact, Eve's probably the best iteration of what I was about to say. I'm always hesitant to make a movie, game, whatever, about someone who really died and make it about their death, because I feel like that's kind of exploitative. But man, there's probably a spooky psychological thriller story to tell about Goya, because if you just read the story of them finding his house and all the paintings in it, like it's creepy. That's a real siren in the background. I promise I'm not trying to freak you guys out with editing, and the game's not particularly trying to freak me out because of the siren. It's trying to freak me out in other ways. And then so anyways, long story short, no, I'm gonna ramble more. Eve actually, I think, is a very good iteration of that. Eve is a game about, if you don't know, it's about a girl who visits a museum and then basically gets sucked into the painting and is trapped in this kind of horror world filled with the ideas of this insane painter. And it's not exactly Goya, but I feel like now that's probably what one of the big inspirations was. I feel like that's a good way to do it. But then you look at Y2K and how he was really creepy about that one girl who died, and basically did a version of that in his own story, and that was creepy. But Goya lived in the 1800s, so enough time has passed. Regardless, none of this matters. Eve is a very good game. Y2K is not a very good game. That's where the second key is. The third key is in the bookstore right before we find Issa for the last time. I believe we get a book about like people being able to affect those around them, and there's another spot in the bookstore where you can find the third key. Speaking of those keys, why don't we take a look at them? Because we don't get item descriptions for the keys. We get something a little bit different. Key of Sacrifice. This one I think was at the bookstore. On the horizon, I saw a star fall into the sea, and the sound of thunder, like trumpets of angels, flew over the water. If we inspect it, a mix of hail, fire, and blood hit my wet face, and a third of all creatures that lived in the sea died. I know enough of my Bible to know that most of that feels like a quote from Revelation. I'm pretty sure like the majority of that is almost a direct quote. The detail of Hail, Fire, and Blood hit my wet face. That feels like a little addition. I think there's a little bit of flair being added to this. But that passage is, I'm pretty sure, almost directly taken from Revelation. Key of Love is more journaling from Ariane. Cycle 888, I've tried to teach Elster how to dance. It's so cute how clumsy she can be when it comes to these things. This is the Key of Love, by the way, which I believe was in the isolation room, which is honestly the spot of the three I would have least associated with love, but that's fine. And if we inspect it, Cycle 1024. Before I met Elster, I never believed I would find someone I could fall in love with like that. So, for anyone who's like, no, you're just reading into it, no, they're definitely a gay couple, and that's how it is. For better or for worse, again, it really depends on what the secret ending is going to be, if that's a good thing or a bad thing by the end of it. If this is, like I've said before, the missing 2.0 or the anti-missing. In terms of whether or not it's going to be a happy ending, I'm a little bit worried by the Key of Eternity, which directly asks me, are you still looking for answers where there are only questions, and if I am to inspect, there's nothing but heartbreak at the end. So I'm emotionally preparing myself for the true ending to not be particularly happy. This is the one that was in the Goya painting, or next to it. You also have a Polaris on that image, and then, yeah, cool little triangles on that. So those are the three keys. They are in my inventory. I just need to say that out loud for my brain. They're in my inventory because once I solve the tarot puzzle, I can't back out. So I need to remind myself, I'm good, they're in my inventory, I have what I need. But like I said, I've also been taking notes. Again, I'm putting the timestamp up again if you don't want to hear any of my notes, but there's some really interesting stuff that I noticed on my second playthrough. So let me just run through all of it. This is a long list. Most of these they're just completely random. So one thing that's just me losing track of everything on my first playthrough, and on the second playthrough it's like, oh yeah, we knew that the whole time and I just didn't remember, is we meet Issa super early on. We meet her in the very first like classroom area, a little right before we get the pistol. We meet her, and she leaves a note in the room that clarified. It's a note for Erica saying, hey, I'm looking for you. So we really know from the beginning Issa is there to find Erica, and I just didn't really piece together exactly what was happening. Part of the reason I got a little bit mixed up is we meet her and a thing flashes on screen saying this is Isolde Ito, but then the subtitles refer to her as Gestalt. And at that point in the game, I didn't know what a Gestalt was. I hadn't really figured out what that all meant. So between Gestalt, Issa, Isolde, like I just got a little bit mixed up as to exactly what was happening, and so I was not keeping close track of what Issa was up to. So what was a reveal for me at the end of the game was probably something I was supposed to be keeping track of the whole time, but that's fine. Also, with full confirmation that Issa is Isolde Ito, Ariane knew the Ito twins. So what I was saying about these happening centuries apart is definitely not true. These events are not all happening super far away from each other because Ariane and Issa are, like, they know each other. Unless, of course, the Eldritch Abomination causing all of the supernatural stuff is just causing a lot of events to mesh together. But, you know, the main storyline is Elster trying to find Ariane, and we do get many notes confirming that Ariane and the Ito twins lived at the same time. So, there's that. Erica is probably unrelated to Elster. I was wrong about that. Erica is just a part of Issa's storyline. Again, a lot like Silent Hill. Like, you meet the side characters, and they're going through their own stuff. I think I tried to figure out how everything was connected, and I tried to connect things that weren't meant to be connected. Those are just two separate storylines.
Editor Flint here again. I promise I'll be brief. This is not quite accurate either. This is something that I didn't realize on either of my first two playthroughs. It wasn't until looking at stuff online and then also playing through the game again that I realized Elster is related to Erica in a way. First off, I was not the only person who thought that Erica and Elster were the connection, so I feel vindicated that I'm not the only person who thought that. But what she actually is related to a certain individual that we catch a glimpse of named Lilith Ito. I saw this a couple of times online, and I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't see the resemblance, because people kept saying when you find the photos of Alina, there's a list that does say Lilith Ito, and I did pick up on that. I didn't quite connect all the dots, and people are saying, yeah, you can see in the photo that it looks exactly like Elster. And I thought they were talking about the person who was standing next to Alina, and I was like, I don't really see it. I don't know what you're talking about. I was looking at the wrong person. We're actually meant to be looking at this person who, yeah, looks a lot like Elster. I probably should have clocked that in a game that is blatantly inspired by Evangelion in some regards, that the character named Lilith would be important in some way. But yes, it does appear that Elster's gestalt was Lilith Ito. A little detail that, again, I didn't notice until several playthroughs, not just these first two, is the fact that we do get a note saying the Elster unit original model / programming was lost, and so a lot of new Elster replicas are being based off of a blueprint they found from a decommissioned Penrose Elster, which we can probably interpret as the one that was with Ariane, the original one that died when the ship crashed. Because that explains why there are so many Elsters trying to get to the gate that Adler has to keep dealing with. There is a time loop situation, but aside from that, there also are a bunch of literal horde of Elsters that keep showing up to the facility and keep trying to break in. And that's because they're all based on the one that fell in love with Ariane. It does ask the question of how did they recover that Elster unit if they flew across the entire solar system, but we'll get back into that later, so just stay tuned. And then another aspect on top of all this is a lot of this game, you play through it for the first half, you think, oh, people are getting their memories of their gestalts, and almost none of that is happening. There's a little bit of that sprinkled in, but most of it is they are getting implants of memories from Ariane, which I think is just a wonderful plot twist in terms of it really is leading you one direction, but it turns out something completely different is happening. However, we do get a couple of flashes from Lilith Ito's perspective in the fake ending. There's a couple of images that from the posters we see do appear to be taking place on Veneta, which is where we know Lilith was fighting, and we know it's where Lilith was from. And we also get this curious image. Just remember this image. Just hang on to that one.
When you first pick up the Plate of Eternity, it shows a flash forward to the door where you eventually have to put all the plates. I thought that was just a really cool flash. It does seem like our Elster is looking for Alina because she's mixing up Alina and Ariane. However, because of all of the reality blending caused by the supernatural stuff, Alina, in turn, is also blending into Ariane. I'll get into that a little bit more later, actually. But that's why we get notes from Alina saying, I haven't seen Elster, I don't know where Elster is, and then once we get down to the mines, we get more Alina notes, and she's like, I don't know if there ever was an Elster. It feels like she was never here now. Because Alina, what I interpret is, Alina and Ariane used to be completely separate people, and the only connection was Ariane saw a picture of Alina and said, wow, she looks a lot like me. But because of all of the weird warping of reality, they start getting memories of each other as well. Or at the very, maybe not Ariane gets Alina memories, but Alina is starting to get Ariane memories, which is spooky. Ariane's mom, Iris, is on Rotfront. That's what we get when we first pick up the Plate of Eternity. Us getting the radio module is literally magic. We just, in case that was not clear the first playthrough, it's worth saying again. I believe it's when we pick up the Plate of Eternity, we flash to the Rotfront outpost where Iris is, we pick up the radio, and then we come back to Elster, and Elster has the radio. Like, that's just magic that she has that. That's just a fully supernatural thing. There is a medical room at some point where I don't know if I examined it the first playthrough, or if I did, I didn't give much note to it, but you can look at a little table that has a covering over it, and it says there's someone inside the oxygen tent. It's hard to look at her, which we don't get a ton of personality from Elster, but that's one moment that we get personality from, and that makes a ton of sense if Elster is driven by the memory of trying to get back to Ariane and her cryogenic pod, and presumably end her life, and the life of the woman that she loves. It makes a lot of sense why Elster would see someone in an oxygen tent and find it very hard to look at. All right, in the school first-person flashback scene, we are playing as Issa. I think that was also in the subtitles, but again, my brain just wasn't really putting two and two together for certain things. We come out of classroom 512, which is an interesting use of that arc number showing up again and again. And it is, when she peeks into the room, it is Ariane she's seeing who's getting bullied. And you can tell because Ariane's hair is starting to turn white. One thing that was a little bit of a bummer, I did put the photo in the inventory, and it doesn't change the cutscene when we meet Adler, and he says, "Let me see that photograph," and then he takes it from you. That's that. I was hoping it would, like, the cutscene would just play out a little bit differently, but no, the cutscene just assumes you have the photo, even if you don't. Interesting note, when Adler pushes you down the elevator shaft, I don't know if I picked up on this the first playthrough, the elevator shaft that you, like, land on is full of bodies, but it's not just normal bodies, it's specifically Elster bodies, which is hinting forward to the fact that Elsters keep showing up at this facility, and Adler has to keep trying to kill them because he thinks it's the only way to stop things from getting worse. So not only is it a haunting image of just hundreds of bodies piled up at the elevator shaft, but that's also, like, there's very specific plot reason for that. I had completely forgotten about this, but when we first find notes about Falke and Falke units, it totally mentions that they have telekinesis. So, like, it's established pretty early on, the whole fact that she can throw spears at you. Like, it's there. It doesn't make a lot of scientific sense. I think they say it's bioresonance, which still a little bit unclear exactly what that means. But we are told pretty early on that, like, hey, if you were to ever fight this thing, it would probably use telekinesis on you. Falke's diary also makes way more sense. Actually, I want to see if I can find it. Gotta stop. Gotta scroll through a little bit to find it. But I don't know how much longer I can go on. I do not want to live anymore. It's what I've become. The red eye beyond the gate showed me. No touch me, poisoned me. It feels like my mind has been contaminated, defiled by another person's memory. I'm no longer fully myself anymore, but I've not fully become someone else either. I'm stuck here between her and me with half-formed dreams and recollections penetrating my brain, taking my every section. Who is she? Who is that white-haired girl? Why do I long to see her again? Why would she curse me like this? As a reminder, Falke went through the gate and got infected with, essentially, Elster's memories. And so that's, Falke is seeing Ariane and is, like, is just going insane because she is now a blend of Falke and Elster. So just rereading this diary is just a lot of, like, it's just very interesting to get that kind of clarity. What's a comforting thing to be looking at? Probably. That's not the. There we go. Okay. That's in the in video game, in the world of video games, looking at a big gun is very comforting. Okay. The beach scene, the beach first-person scene, is probably on a timer, because this time I went over to the right, and there are some notes you can read, but it just kind of eventually ends, and so I think that's just built onto a timer. I think I took screenshots of the notes, and I will be showing what screenshots I took in a bit. Okay, and then another thing in terms of speeding through my second playthrough was about 6 hours. The first one was 12. First couple levels went pretty quickly, and a really cool thing is that, actually no, I'll get to that when I get to it. When you get to the nowhere level, with where none of the rooms are like actually that you go into one door and it comes out a different side, and you don't have a map. There's the Hellmouth, and you meet Issa and get the rifle from her. That whole level. Don't know why, but I glitched a ton on my second playthrough. Something kept happening where ordinarily you go through, Elster goes through a door and it's kind of a cutscene, and she opens the door in the new room and she walks a couple of steps and then the door closes and then you have control. And it's a very quick process, it's very smooth, it doesn't bother the gameplay at all. But that's generally how it goes. In my second playthrough on that level specifically, frequently Elster would not walk those extra couple steps forward after entering the new room, and she would in fact be the doors would close without the character model moving forward, and she would be trapped behind the door, and it would be a couple of seconds of that, and then she would just teleport to the center of the room, which in one specific instance, the long bridge to get to the ring puzzle, actually ported me past the enemies and made it way easier. But in 2 or 3 other scenarios, ported me right in the middle of a group of enemies, and so there were a couple of points where that was actually really annoying because it almost killed me. And I in fact did die at one point, although that was my own hubris, that wasn't because of a glitch. But yeah, a weirdly consistent glitch, and it's weird that it only happened on my second playthrough. I'm not exactly sure why or what would have caused that, but just fun notes. Speaking of glitches, the boss fight of all the hands in the cage also glitched out for me, in that at one point the boss rushed over to me and then teleported into the wall, and I got really worried that there was nothing I was going to be able to do. What is fun about that, though, is that you can see Issa picking up the gun, fumbling for the bullets, trying to load them in. Like, if you keep your eye on her the whole time, it's actually a really fun, watching her get closer to delivering the killing blow. I don't think it's on a timer. I think it is based on a mixture of how much damage have you done to the boss and how much ammo do you have left. Because once the boss got stuck in the wall, a little bit was peeking out, so I could still shoot it. But I was safe from it because it couldn't move. And so I just kind of waited, and eventually Issa just kind of was looking around frantically, even though she had fully loaded the gun. And then I went over and shot the boss a couple more times, and then Issa shot it with the rifle. So, yeah, not sure if it's based on ammo or on damage. It's probably one or the other. Like, if you're out of ammo, then Issa will automatically shoot, but then if you just do enough damage, then she'll also shoot. I don't know which one I did that second time, but whatever. Then you get, after that, you get your fake ending. That's what, it threw me off how quickly we get the fake ending, and I was like, oh yeah, Rotfront is after the fake ending. But I mentioned the Diavolo shot, where it's a bunch of people lined up, and then they all look behind them. Specifically, now that I'm looking through the game more clarity, specifically the one on the line of people on the right is Alina / Ariane, and all the people who are coalescing in that kind of role. And then on the left side, it's a bunch of different Elsters, and one of them is wearing the armor you have for most of the game. One of them is wearing the combat armor I have now. One of them is wearing the snowsuit in the prologue. It just represents all the different versions of Elster that have been through this cycle as well. So that was a cool detail. Check the eye on the menu screen. Ooh, yeah, that's a cool one. Apparently, maybe in other versions of the game, not the Switch one. Apparently, you get the fake ending, and then the game just automatically boots up to Prologue 2.0. Not me. You have to hit the begin button for me. As you all saw. But a cool detail is that in the fake ending, you see Elster's eyes fade, and there's kind of a glowing light in the middle that fades away. in most versions of the menu, when you start up the game, you can see that glowing light, and only after the fake ending, when you have to boot the game back up to get to Prologue 2.0, the light has faded, and the eye looks like it does when Elster is quote-unquote dead, which is just a cool detail. A thing I missed in Prologue 2.0 is there is a little doodle you can find in the same room as the first one, where I was like, oh, how did I not find this before? It is labeled Colibri, which is one of the, I forget the unit type, but one of the units in the basements of Sierpinski, who we find. She is, I believe she's one of those where the twitching monsters, you have to set the radio to a certain frequency. She's an uncorrupted version of one of those, and we see notes from her throughout, but then we actually meet her and talk to her for a little bit. And so it's so strange that Ariane has doodled something labeled Colibri, and not only that, it has what appears to be a cabbage for a head, making it resemble the monster version of that enemy type, which the Colibri we met hadn't gotten to that point yet. So just kind of a little scary thing. Another thing that I picked up on is right before the dance scene with Ariane and Elster, she specifies it's our 3000 cycle anniversary, which I believe is literally like, I think she even mentioned there's some briefings I have to read, but for now let's dance. I believe when we get back to the ship right at the very ending, it's the briefing that says, hey, if you haven't found a planet by now, you should give up and die. I believe that is the specific reading that she was about to read, but she said, let's dance first. So just an extra tragedy to, they had one last nice happy moment, and then Ariane realized she was doomed. But then the implication was she wasn't. The implication was they did land on a scary alien planet. Which is, it's just, I don't think that, I think the timeline of this game purposefully does not make sense, but it's so fascinating trying to figure out what came quote unquote before or after certain events. Yeah. So you get the dance, and then it flashes to the ship again where it's frozen, and it's where you find the combat armor. You find one note that says, like, I just want it to end, and then, like, really, like, I'm freezing to death. You go get the armor. If you check that note again, it changes to something way simpler. I don't remember the exact wordage, but it is a even simpler version of, like, I just want to die, which is upsetting. We're wrapping up here-ish. When you get back to Sierpinski 2.0, I don't think I really registered in the moment because I was too busy mashing buttons, but you do definitely need that classroom key from the safe again. The game actually tells you this. I don't know if you remember, but in the room with the key and the safe, there's a German sentence written on the chalkboard. And I might have actually said out loud, I wish there was a translation for that. Turns out, if you just inspect it with the A button, it tells you the translation, and I was just being stupid. The translation is, you've been here before, which is the game basically explicitly telling you, yeah, use the knowledge of the previous Elster to open this safe. You have the information you need, which is really cool, and also makes me feel like a lot of the ways I solve the puzzles in this game is just like a really big one was the bookstore. I didn't have to look through I didn't have to find the medical records in the Rotfront level, because I could just look up Issa's birthday because I already had attained that information. In fact, I literally checked the recording to find it. And I feel like that's not cheating. I feel like, in fact, the game is kind of encouraging you to do that on your second playthrough, of just kind of cheat the puzzle solutions because you've already done this before, which completely fits in with the themes of the game of people doing the same thing over and over, and memories coming back to you and enabling you to move forward, which is just a really cool marriage of gameplay and story. I think that's really, really cool. The game pretty much encourages you to start cheesing through some of those puzzles that you've already solved in a previous playthrough. That being said, The Nowhere level and the Rotfront level were both a little bit of a slog because those ones are less about solving puzzles and more about just getting through the rooms to find all the collectibles. So, you know, the Sierpinski levels were like a breeze. I breezed through those, and then it got to the Nowhere level and the Rotfront level, and it's like, okay, now I have to get through this. And I thought I might be able to, for Rotfront, just know the moon puzzle already, the tarot puzzle, but no, this motherfucker, doesn't fall through the ceiling into the atrium level until you collect all the tarot cards. So even though you might know the solution to the tarot cards, you still have to collect all of them before you can get this, which is necessary to actually solve the puzzle. Speaking of which, though, when you first get to the atrium and it introduces the level with a little cutscene, you can see this thing. I remember picking up on it, but you are looking up through the atrium, and there's a weird little circle in the middle of it. And I remember seeing it and being like, what is that? It's not until the second playthrough I realized it's literally showing you the item you will need to complete the last puzzle of the game, which is just a neat little detail. All of the enemies with red eyes in this last Rotfront level are, in fact, I believe, wearing the gas masks that were also being worn by the bullies in the first-person segment at the school bullying Ariane, which is another really cool just reusage of imagery. Also, the blacklight reader that you need to find the code for the tarot cards is room 512, another iteration of that. I don't know if I picked up on the first playthrough, but the second time around I was like, oh, hey, look at that. And then the last thing on my notes, I was just kind of curious what would happen if I started playing through, like I mentioned the photo, whether or not that's in your inventory or storage. Another thing I tried is, hey, do I even need to wake up Issa after the boss fight? No, you don't. You can do that to get the rifle, but if you don't care about the rifle, you can just not do that. And I was curious if that would change the ending cutscene with Issa at all. It doesn't. It's still the same sad ending for her no matter what. Yeah, just a fun little thing of like for you speedrunners out there. Yeah, you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, those are all my notes. But what I am going to do is see what else I've got. I believe this first one is on the. These are some screenshots I took. Which I also just remembered this, since the Switch has the screenshot feature. The eidetic module that allows you to take pictures in game is completely worthless for the Switch version. It makes more sense for other versions for games, for game consoles that don't have a dedicated button to taking pictures of the screen. But in the Switch version particularly, man, that module is useless. I believe this was on the beach. I believe this was also on the beach. I'll read them out. And a star fell in the sky, and a mountain fell into the sea, and turned to blood, and moon, and turned dark. This also sounds very similar to a Revelation verse. And we also do get one image in one of the cutscenes, one of the spooky transition cutscenes, of a literal thing falling to the ground that appeared to be like a shooting star. But yeah, and then we have, it calls me in a sea of flesh, we will become one, but I can never go back to being me. I think that's also on the beach, the spooky note. This is the colibri doodle that is on the ship, which it's kind of cute looking at it, but it's kind of terrifying because that's colibri. It's a little bit weird. It's actually spelled differently from the colibri we meet in game, but she's in that same fetal position as we find her in, but we find her when she's still healthy, and the weird kind of cabbage on top of her head very much implies being corrupted by the eldritch sickness, because that's what all the monster versions of that unit type look like. We also, we got a couple of other lore things that I just completely missed. I forget exactly what this was. This was in one of the. I think this was in like not a save room where you can save the game, but a safe room. Like it was that room that I was like, oh, this makes me feel really nervous. But there's actually no enemies in here. It's just a ton of items. But due to the ongoing transit of Kitej, ration shipments to Veneta have been disrupted by Imperial forces again. Millions of Yusan citizens must starve for yet another month as Imperial missile frigates in Kitej orbit critically damage one of our humanitarian convoys on their way to Veneta, sending diplomatic efforts with the Empire into another crisis. The orbit of Kitej will continue to block free travel between Veneta, Rotfront, and Heimat for another 8 seasons, which leaves our liberation troops on Veneta stranded on the desolate ocean world with minimal support. Convoys will continue to be sent despite the Imperial blockade. Only through perseverance can we rebuild what remains of Veneta. So we actually got not very much information about the war itself and what that was like, and we do get a little bit here, which is interesting. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised I missed it. Much like with the Colibri Doodle, I can't believe I missed that. Yeah, and that might be all I took. Yeah, that's all I have screenshots of. Okay, and with all that out of the way, those are all my notes. Those are all my thoughts. For now, we're about to get another ending. I'm going to have way more thoughts, I imagine. With that, I think we are ready to move forward. I have all 3 keys in my inventory. Got my trusty gun, and I have the actual plot device I need to move the puzzle forward. So let's save one last time, and we'll see where the game takes us. Also, there's a fun little thing, in case you caught it. I kept my old save file on file 1, just in case I want to go back. Yeah. Okay. Now I have to do that thing I said of, oh, the memories of my previous time trying to find the gate are melting into my brain so I can see what the answer to the puzzle is. Okay. Oh crap! I forgot I had to do some weird puzzling because I forgot what was actually where. Okay, the sun is Heimat, and that one should be a gibbous. I think the blue. I think the blue represents darkness, and the orange represents the actual planet. So we're doing that. God damn it. Okay, hang on. Gotta find the thing again. What is this? Okay, yeah. Should see if there's any of these other ones I didn't show you guys. Oh, I can show you this. Yeah. So we have Alina So and Lilith Ito right below her. Yeah, that's what we get with one of the tarot cards. I don't think there's. This is the main one. No, I didn't even. God damn it. God damn it. I didn't even open up the room with the black light in it. So I didn't even read the riddle in this playthrough, so I don't have access to it in my menu. God damn it. It's okay, we can figure this out. The tower was on Kitej. I feel confident. Death was on the bottom, and death corresponded to Veneta, I think. So that's actually correct already. Bouillon might have been... Yeah, wait, it's actually pretty close, I think. Bouillon is either a new moon or a full moon. I know that much. God damn it. God damn it. No, Lang. Lang was the tower, maybe. Which means Rotfront needs to be... God damn it. Oh no, I feel a memory coming in that doesn't belong to me. Oh no. Whose memory could this possibly be? Oh no, my brain. It's happening to me. No, I don't need to find the cards, internet. Bouillon, full blue, no moon in the circle. Okay, I was right about some of these. Veneta, small shadow on the left. Damn it. Damn it. Kitej, small shadow on the right. Rotfront, eclipsed, fully blue. Oh, I missed that completely. Heimat, small shadow on the left. That's correct. And Lang, large shadow on the left. Nope. Other way. Okay. Thank you, memory of a previous life or someone else's life. I don't know whose. How mysterious that I remembered that off the top of my head. Okay. Alright, so now that we're in here, we could pick up that book. Or... I wonder if it says anything different. Doubt it, but... yeah, that's all the same. Also, before I forget, I just have to use the word explanations in the video at some point, so that way I feel justified when I make that the title of the video. There, I said the title within the video at some point. So that's why this finale is called Explanations. And that's definitely not a cynical strategy of trying to get more views and getting more people to click on the video. Yes, I shall use the key of eternity on this, and I shall use the key of love on this, and I shall use the key of sacrifice on this. Now, we have a safe. It seems to be the insignia of the safe manufacturer. Interesting! I wouldn't have guessed that that's all it meant. So, we have some numbers we could try to put in here. Oh, I don't get to zoom in. Sorry. You remember how, probably in the very first episode, towards the very beginning of the game, there was a voice that said, Achtung, Achtung, and then repeated a string of numbers, but repeated them twice. Those numbers were pretty important. And I should have screenshotted them. But instead, I'm getting a memory from some other person. Okay. It's also a long-ass number, so give me a second here. 3, 9, 4, 8, 6. I'm concerned about the sensitivity as well. 6, 0, 1, 7, 0. 2, 4, 3, 2, 6, 0, 1, 0, 6, 4. Okay. I have no idea what happens next. That is as far as I've read. But that is the correct number. So let's see what happens. White lilies. Pick up the flower. not speak German. Oh, it's the eye. It's that creepy eye. Remember our promise. The one that Falke kept mentioning. Okay, interesting. All right. I figured there'd be a little bit more than that, but that's fine. Okay. So I believe lilies are what you bring to funerals, I believe. So we definitely get the implication that Ariane is dead for good. And perhaps by accepting that, it seems like that's kind of what happened, is Elster, by finding the flowers, fully accepted that Ariane was dead and gone forever. And then collapsed and appeared to die in that kind of altar thing that was surrounding the tank that looks like the tank Ariane was in. I don't quite know what that glowing diamond is. That's mysterious. We've seen a kind of diamond insignia, like a shape that resembles that on like one of the safes, I think, on one of the door with the button pads that you have to find on the nowhere level. But I don't know quite what that's supposed to represent. And then that final scene, remember our promise, seems like a slightly more optimistic iteration of the promise we get in the promise ending, which it seemed like Ariane in that last scene was kind of sickly. And I was trying to register a lot. I was thinking a lot, and I didn't register every single thing. I think that room didn't look too good, right? It looked like that was post crash. So it feels like Elster woke Ariane up, and then they had one last dance. Which honestly, I'm okay with that. If the game is going to have a sad ending, that's a pretty good sad ending. Seeing them get to dance again. Because that was definitely a different dance scene from the first one. The lighting was completely different. I think Ariane was wearing different clothes. So I could be misinterpreting a little bit, but I interpret that to mean they had one last dance. They had one last moment of happiness together. And then just because it makes me a little bit happy, I'm going to say that Ariane used the last of her energy with that dance and died on her own, but it wasn't suicide, you know? I'm just going to go with that headcanon. Regardless, yeah. Considering how hard it is to find those keys, I will say I was expecting a little bit more from the secret ending, but that's what a lot of secret endings in video games are. It's not meant to completely change your perspective on every single thing happening. So I probably should have lowered expectations. Sounds bad. I probably should have gone in with different expectations. But yeah, I think that's kind of, I think what makes that ending work is that it's a nice synthesis of the memory and promise endings. It's not just a ruthless find her, kill her, the deed is done. Their relationship is still very important to Elster finding Ariane again. So with that in mind, I think that of the four endings we're given, I think I do like that one the best. But yeah, it's still sad. But yeah, aside from that, I don't have a lot to add on to my thoughts from the first ending of the first actual ending as opposed to the fake ending. But the first actual ending did a very good job of answering just enough of my questions that I felt satisfied. And I stand by that even with the secret ending. I would have liked a little bit more just because I had to play through the game again for 6 hours, which again, it's a great game. I'm not complaining that I have to play the game again, but I put work into getting that secret ending. Artifact is the name of the ending, which I assume refers to the glowing diamond, which I don't know what the glowing diamond is. Interesting. But yeah, you can see there I got 7 hours there. Saved a lot, especially after I died. Once I died, I was like, and I realized I had not saved in a while. I was like, okay, well, that's not happening to me again. So I started saving a bunch more. Yeah. I think I will say I think none of the endings are like, oh yeah, the game was all leading to that and it paid off. But I don't think that's necessary. I don't think the ending has to be the cherry on top to your game necessarily. I think you can just tell a really, really compelling, good story, and the ending is good. And it doesn't have to be a perfect ending for the game to still be fantastic. And I don't want to, after my BioShock Infinite rant, no, that's a completely different circumstance. I'm not gonna say I was wrong about BioShock Infinite. I stand by everything I said in that video. But whereas BioShock Infinite had an end that was so off the walls and so trying to be cool that it made the rest of the game worse. This is an example of an ending that doesn't like. The ending is not the best part of the game, but it's fine because there's kind of a slow answering of your questions. And we even got told by the key, like, you're not going to get very many more answers out of this ending. It literally told us that when we were trying to get here. So, yeah, it's just really interesting to think about of how I find the ending not bad, but slightly underwhelming. And yet, having played through the game twice, yeah, this game is one of the best games I've played in years. And I think I mentioned at the end of the fake ending, I can't say it's going to go on my top 10, but after the whole extra segment after it, it's a contender. I can't say for sure if it makes my top 10, but it is a contender. Another thing while playing through the second time, I realized is that this game is kind of the perfect length. Playing through 6 hours of the game again, it started to feel a little bit tedious. I think having one playthrough between 9 to 12 hours is kind of the perfect length for the kind of gameplay loop of sneak around, shoot enemies when you have to, but make sure you're conserving on ammo and conserving on health items. Just the central core gameplay dynamic works very well for an 8 to 12 hour game. And if there was another level after Rotfront, it would have started to feel really repetitive, I think. This game is the exact length it should be. So that is another thing to just be another thing to just compliment of like, damn, you guys really knew exactly what you were going for and you nailed it. Which is pretty much the entire game is that, like, literally just every single aspect of this game is, I can tell they were going for something, and my God, they accomplished it, almost without fail. My only real complaints are, like, having played through the entire game and knowing that fake ending is not the real ending, because that was a big complaint. It wasn't as, like, insulting as the BioShock Infinite ending, but that fake ending was one of, like, okay, that soils things a little bit. But then once you get to the real endings, like I said, they're bittersweet, and the secret ending was just so much work that I thought there was going to be a little bit more to it. But if you go into it not expecting it to have some massive revelation, then that's still a pretty solid ending to get. You can also, by the way, you can see the little shiny thing, the kind of circle in the middle, which resembles slightly, not exactly, but slightly, a red eyeball staring down from above, which is, terrifying. Yeah, I kind of love that we really didn't get much explanation as to what the gate actually was. I'm totally on board with just not really getting to know more about that. Interesting that it's continue and not begin, because I think after my first playthrough it was begin. What happens if I hit this? Okay, alright. Oh, I have to hit begin anew. Okay, got it. Alright, never mind. Yeah. Yeah. That sums up most of my thoughts of just have my complaints being addressed after the fake ending. The real endings are pretty solid. My only real complaint is on my second playthrough I was glitching a bunch, and the nowhere level is a pain to get through on the second playthrough. But on your first playthrough, when you're not sure what you're getting into and every single room is nerve-wracking, it accomplishes what it's setting out for phenomenally, as does pretty much every other aspect of this game. So, yeah. This game's really fucking good. Yeah. Just congratulations to everyone who worked on this game, which again, seems like it was a really small team. You guys did so good. It's so good. My other complaint is just to bring my politics into it is, like I mentioned, it wasn't quite the anti-missing I was prepping myself for, but it is still a queer love story that ends tragically, and it's not that you can never have that and you can never write that story, but that does happen a lot, and for those who aren't too keyed into the trope of burying your gays, but like in media, gay relationships tend to end in tragedy way more often than straight relationships, and just to even things out, we need more queer love stories with a happy ending. That's all I'm saying. I don't think this. I think because the characters and the relationship of Elster and Ariane is so central to this story, I don't think this is the bury your gays trope as it usually is, which generally is like for side characters, they will fall in love and then immediately run into tragedy. Whereas that's not what's really happening in this game. I'm just trying to make the point of The Missing made me so happy because it's this really dark and pretty depressing story, but it gets a 100% happy ending at the end, and that was just such a nice change of pace for how a lot of spooky horror games and a lot of queer love stories in fiction tend to go. And this one did also end sadly. But like I said, I really appreciate the bittersweet aspect to it. This game is much darker and more like dread-inducing than The Missing. So if you were expecting a happy ending, I don't think there was ever a chance of like a truly happy ending. I think it was always going to be bittersweet at best. So I'm not surprised, and I had prepared myself for that. And yeah, I think the ending works. Like I said, I probably expected too much. I expected some revelation that I was never meant to get. But I think the ending works, and now that I have that ending under my belt, I can definitively say that yes, this is the best game I've played in years. Yeah. I don't know what the last game I can say before that was. Probably. I don't want to ramble too long. Off the top of my head, Breath of the Wild comes close. It is probably around the same level as this, which was 5 years ago. Can you believe that? Breath of the Wild was 5 years ago. It still feels like a recent game, and I guess in the grand scheme of things, it is. But like, yeah, damn, 5 years. But yeah, I guess that means this is the best game I've played in 5 years, which, considering how old I am, that's like a significant fraction of my life that I've played a game get this good. So basically what I'm saying is I love this game. I love it a lot. Okay, and then Editor Flint here with some final thoughts. I'm going to try to keep it brief, but in case it wasn't clear, I love talking about this game. In terms of the like big picture, what's actually happening beyond the gate, what's causing all of this, there's kind of three main interpretations I've seen throughout the internet. One of them I think is pretty silly. It's just that everything is happening in Ariane's head as she's slowly dying, or even sillier, everything's happening in Elster's head as the original Elster is dying. I think having it all be a dream and all be part of their imagination and there's nothing else happening, I think is inherently uninteresting. And it seems like the main like piece of evidence for this theory is some of the things don't seem to make sense, but it's okay if they don't make sense because it's all in their imagination. And I just feel like that's incredibly reductive for a game that has clearly had so much thought put into it, to just explain it away as a dream and not put any more thought into trying to figure out what's happening. I think that's kind of silly, so I don't really like that theory very much. The other main two are about accepting the idea that there are facilities that are being corrupted. Sierpinski and Rotfront have appeared to have coalesced in some way. There's a connection there. You do see Falke and Adler at both facilities, so it's not like there's just a jump from one to the other. They are kind of being crammed together by some supernatural force. And the question is the supernatural force just Ariane? There is a pretty big theory about that, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support that as well. Basically, everything you see throughout the game is tied to her subconscious in some way. The enemy design is based off of the bullies that we see in the Rotfront flashback. There's her teeth are falling out from radiation poisoning, so there's a point where we see a bunch of teeth falling out. The Colibri drawing we got, I actually got this wrong when I was recording. All of those unit types are called Colibris, and the one that we find is just doesn't have a specific name. It's just a Colibri unit. That's actually a pun in German, the doodle we find. It's supposed to look like cauliflower, and it seems like Ariane doodled that, and so it makes sense if she then fell into her bioresonance coma, her influence on the Colibri unit would take the form of the image she has in her head of what if they weren't like this, what if they looked like this instead. It makes perfect sense why the corrupted Colibris would then take that form. The King in Yellow is a really interesting detail. It's a book we find several times. It's a real book in real life. I'll be talking about it a little bit later, actually. But within the game, it's notable that we never find out what's inside. We find it 3 or 4 times. We get interrupted by a cutscene, or there's an item inside, but we don't read the text. Elster never actually gets to see what's inside, and we find out from notes throughout the end of the game that, similarly, Ariane was very curious what was in that book. She saw it in the bookstore, but when she finally went to go check it out, it had been confiscated, and she never got to look inside, so it makes perfect sense that her subconscious would take that book that was so intriguing to her and have it fulfill the same function in this manifestation of her subconscious of this mysterious, mystical object where you never get to find out what's inside because Ariane never found out what was inside. And then the last point kind of transitions into the other theory that I actually prefer slightly more, even though I think there's actually a little less evidence for it. The red eye overlooking everything, you see it in the artifact ending, and it is briefly referenced in the Pareidolia text we find, that there was a storm at Rotfront that you could see from the ground, but it was just this ever-present cyclonic storm in the sky. But there's a bunch of folklore surrounding it, and it's kind of as the personification of surveillance and being watched over. I think the idea that this thing has been personified is an interesting chicken and egg situation of it's a very reasonable possibility that Ariane remembered that folklore and then internalized that and manifested that as the thing overlooking the gate, and that's still just stemming from her head of having heard that. But the other hand, the other alternative, I think, to all this is the idea that there was some horrible eldritch abomination entity out there that perhaps also influenced folklore around this massive thing in the eye overlooking everything. And that is what Ariane found, and that is what is actually causing the corruption. It bonded with Ariane in some way and is like amplifying her bioresonance to corrupt everything around her and form these kind of space-time loops. I think part of the reason I think this makes more sense is you can kind of explain away a lot of the stuff happening as Ariane is bioresonant, and we don't really know what bioresonance is. But we know Ariane is bioresonant, and to say because she's bioresonant, she can just mush Sierpinski and Rotfront together and make them become the same location seems like a big jump, because the next step down in bioresonance we see is Falke, who can shoot spears at you sometimes. And it seems like those are two just wildly different and drastically different displays of power. So I think it makes more sense for what is causing all this corruption to be Ariane plus something else as opposed to just Ariane. There's also the detail of, if this is all coming from Ariane's subconscious, you would think everyone is getting Ariane's memories, and some people are. Alina is, but some characters are not. Falke, most notably, is getting Elster's memories, and Elster's not bioresonant, so I feel like there has to be something else at play that is corrupting everything within the Penrose 512 ship and expanding that outwards. Speaking of the Penrose 512 ship, it also raises the question, we get that one note implying that all of the Elsters are based on the 512 Elster because they lost the original Gestalt template. And if they hurdled 5,000 cycles across space, how the hell did the Yusan nation get a hold of that Elster again? And if we do subscribe to the theory that there is some incredibly powerful abomination that's capable of forming these kind of gates between spaces and bringing things together and coalescing them together, and it perhaps wanted access to someone with powerful bioresonance because that would allow its influence to spread, and it felt that individual leaving the solar system, it might not want that individual to leave. And so I think it is possible and very unsettling to think about the fact that perhaps Ariane hurtled through space for 5,000 cycles away from the solar system, and then she crash landed right back where she started. And she went out of her ship, and she went through a gate, and she went down into a pit, and within the pit, something was waiting for her. I think this theory is also just more fun because it's scarier. This is a horror game after all, and I find it a little more unsettling if there is some scary monster out there, actually. So that's one of the reasons I like that theory, but I think those are the two main schools of thought. One thing I really love about this game is that it answers about 85% of your questions, and then the last 15%, you can kind of theorize and put your own interpretation on it, and you'll probably be able to find evidence to back up your interpretation. And you really take from this game what you want to get out of it for some certain aspects. Speaking of which, what the fuck is happening with that artifact ending? Let's talk about that for a minute. Something I haven't really seen anyone talk about is that Lilith screenshot I found, the screenshot of Lilith's memory of her in front of the same altar. Is she grieving? Is this just a memorial? It's possible if we go to the gut reaction I had of interpreting the ending as Elster grieving and coming to terms with Ariane's death, then maybe that's all this is. But if Elster is performing some kind of supernatural ritual, it's possible that she got the memories of how to conduct that ritual by having Gestalt memories from Lilith. I also want to briefly talk about The King in Yellow, which I have not read, but another YouTuber has. And I'm going to link to his video right now in the little pop-up showing up right now. If you are interested in this, I encourage you to look it up. If what I'm about to talk about sounds interesting, definitely watch that video instead, because I've not read the story. But like I said, King in Yellow is an actual story of Lovecraft-esque horror. And in one of those short stories, the lily pops up as kind of a symbol of preserving life, of something going through a process when it is dying or wounded, and then coming back years later and being in the same state it was in when it was first put into this preservation process, much like a cryopod. And if I remember correctly, that story ends with a woman who has been wounded and about to die being placed through the same preservation process as the lily, and years later is brought back, and she is reunited with the love of her life. And that's a nice thing to think about, and considering the lilies are very important to the artifact ending in some way, I think it makes sense why perhaps that is a reference to the King in Yellow, in which case maybe there's a happy ending happening after all in the artifact ending. I don't know for sure. I don't know if that ending is a memory of some kind, if it's supposed to be heaven with Elster and Ariane both dead, if it's something that's literally happening and Ariane has literally been brought back, if Elster has defeated whatever eldritch entity was beyond the gate, or if she's made a deal with that entity to bring Ariane back to life. I don't know if the cycle is fully broken, or if the cycle will continue forever and destroy everything around it. I don't know, and I know it might be frustrating to some people, but in the end, I don't care. I think back to the line that Elster gave to Adler in the fake ending. It doesn't matter. The literal things happening in this game are intriguing and fascinating and maddening, trying to figure out what's literally happening. And every time you seem to connect two dots, 5 other dots that you thought had been connected fall apart because of the new connection you made. Nothing is 100% answerable in this game. And I love that, even though it's frustrating. But the emotional core of this game is very consistent and remains very true to itself throughout the entire game, and particularly across all 4 endings. But when you look at the 3 main endings, they are all bittersweet at best. In 2 of the endings, Elster dies without even fulfilling the promise she set out to do. In 2 of the endings, she dies alone. And in all 3 of them, she dies heartbroken. I don't know if the artifact ending represents Elster coming to terms with Ariane's death, or if Ariane has truly been resurrected, if this is one final moment before Ariane passes away, or if she is fully restored and they'll get to be happy forever. I don't know. But what I do know is the artifact ending is the only one of the 4 in which Ariane and Elster get a moment of closure. It's the only one where they get a moment of peace. And I feel like they've earned that. That being said, my blood pressure has been at its highest during the past week that it has probably in 5 years. Probably since I played Breath of the Wild. Another game that I was thinking about Let's Playing is not a horror game, but I would still classify as stress-inducing. And I might bump that down. I don't think I'm going to play that one next, because I think I need something relaxing. Might be Bayo 3. I haven't bought that yet. I'm going to Let's Play that at some point, but that might be next. That might be in a little while. There is another game, now that winter's setting in, there's a game that I think might be a nice little refreshing thing to be playing during the wintertime. And it's one I've been meaning to revisit for a long time. So I think that might actually be next on the docket. So stay tuned for that. I'm still not sure, but whatever comes next, it's gonna be a little bit more easygoing than this. Because man, what a fantastic game! It accomplishes everything it set out to do, including stressing me out, and that is the job I think it did best. So, love this game to death. I am happy that I'm also going to be able to put it down for a while. Although I'm also immediately going to pick up. I'm going straight to TV tropes and to like a bunch of like trivia sites and seeing what else I missed. But yeah, that's where we're going to leave it for tonight. Ah, you love a game that makes you think. You gotta love it. You gotta love it. And God, this game made me think. I'm just gonna start talking in circles, as I often do when I get to the end of a game I love, and I feel like I want to say more about it, but I can't think of anything. So if I have any other new thoughts, I'll just put it in the description. Read that if you want even more thoughts after, what, fucking hour 15 of me rambling about this game. This game's really fucking good. But like I said, I think it's about time we put it down and we take a breath and we de-stress. But hey, Rose Engine. Fuck yeah, guys. You fucking nailed it. This game rocks. Have a safe trip home, everybody.